I'm recording this the same day, literally just moments after recording my last video on disability, but I want to make the same kind of introduction real quick, and that is that I am one person. I do not speak for blind people. I speak as my own human who's been through my own experiences, and what I'm talking about today is something that might get under people's skin. It might rub you the wrong way, but I just want you to understand that if you disagree with me, it is fine. Please be respectful of each other in the comments. If there's discourse, I'm okay with that. Just please keep it reasonable. But today I wanted to talk about the term blind, because even in the blind community, the word blind can stir up some silt at the bottom of the river, so to speak. I'm going to talk about what I prefer, why I prefer it, and what comes with the various terms around blindness and my experiences with them. So I've been blind my entire life. I was born at 26 weeks, very premature, and for me, it's just the way things are. I'm blind. And for some people, that word and the ideas around the word blind either have a very defined definition or a very scary definition, depending on where you're coming from. I'm going to start with kind of the sighted people angle and work my way more niche as we go. So you might have just noticed I used the term sighted people. What is that supposed to mean? Like, is that a negative? No. Sighted people is anybody with 20/20 vision, which is most human beings, and the world is designed for and around people who are sighted. That being things like road signs, cars, driving, signage, advertisements. The world, as you understand it, is designed for you. And so for you, the concept of removing all of that, bam, gone, blind, it's like, hits you like a ton of bricks. I think people have an element of fear around the word blind. And that is perfectly justifiable. If you were to essentially say the same thing to me and say something about being deaf, that idea does scare me in some ways because I depend on my hearing quite a bit. But I, having met several deaf, hard of hearing people in my life, understand ways to adapt to that situation that would make it so I could function. And I understand that there are ways to do it. And so I have this notion that being deaf isn't terrifying. People don't have that about blindness. And so when I'm in public and I bring up the idea, hey, I'm blind, people sometimes have such a strong reaction to this. I've been told some very interesting things by people, such as, oh man, oh, you're blind? That's so scary. Dude, if I were blind, I would maybe unalive myself. Now, how do you think that feels as someone who wakes up every day and is blind? Essentially, you just told me that if you were in my shoes and you think that maybe I shouldn't be alive because you couldn't do it, or that you feel like you couldn't do it. First of all, you could. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be fun. But there are so many ways now to adapt to being blind that your life would actually be all right. You'd figure it out. And you'd maybe be able to get a big network of support if you reached out and wanted that. But being blind as a concept is not. I don't wake up every day screaming. People have this concept of being blind equals being scary, because if the power goes out on you, what's your first reaction? It's a stab of fear, because you see the world and the lights just went out, right? How do I navigate? How do I need to go get a flashlight. I need to remedy this with vision. I need to light a candle. I need to make it so that I can get back to experiencing the world in a way that makes sense to me, and that way is vision. And so the concept of not having vision is scary. However, when you're born that way, when you're born into a reality in which I can't read print with my eyes in a regular way, with adaptation I can, but I can't just look at a book, go to the library, grab a book and read it. I read Braille. And I've been reading Braille since I was 4 years old. I've been reading Braille for 23 years. Not very well now, but that's besides the point. So I'm used to being blind. I'm used to it. I live here. I live in the word blind, and I'm comfortable there because I know what it means for me. And those are key words. I know what that means for me. I don't know what it means for other people. And when you're sighted, the concept is so foreign And I've had the complete gambit of, again, that level of fear. I have had people try to fix me through prayer because their idea of being blind is so scary and so intolerable that they believe that God would never allow that. And if he would allow that, that he should fix it because obviously he just made a mistake. And again, to me, that brings up the concept of why do I need to be fixed? I'm okay. I'm happy as the person that I am who is blind. And so the term blind to me is just as functionally normal as my preferred pronouns or me having brown hair. There are things about me that are just the way they are, and blindness is one of them. Now, when you talk about the blind community specifically, what you get into is that there are sort of degrees of blindness. And the way I'm going to use to explain this for those of you who are sighted is actually the way that they divided us when I was in high school sports. I actually went to a school for the blind. And when we would compete in sports, they didn't want the kids who had just over the legally blind line, which I'll get to in a minute, competing with kids who couldn't see anything at all, because the disadvantages there, especially for something like track and field, would be pretty apparent. For example, if I can see really well, I can stay in the lane of a track and run laps around a traditional track. If I'm totally blind, could I maybe figure it out with a cane? Absolutely, but the more efficient way to complete races is through something called guide wires, which are wires that have pieces of tape affixed to the 60 meter and 100 meter marks, and you essentially run lengths of that. So you'd run 100 meters down, turn around, run 100 meters back, there's 200, and you'd run as many lengths, kind of like swimming, as it takes to complete your race. And that was for what we're going to start with, which is Class A. So in Class A, and this is, again, for sports, this is not the way that blindness is actually divided. I'm just using it as an explanation device. So Class A for track was no vision to light perception. So if you close your eyes really, really tight, for example, I have a grow light / film light on me for this video, and when I close my eyes and I look to my left and my right, I can actually see that light change just a little bit. So you've probably experienced that. If you ever close your eyes outside, you can still find the sun. Try it now in whatever space you're in and see how much nuance and how much detail you get based on how much you close your eyes. That's a very, very basic definition of light perception as a demonstration. Class B was people with slight shape perception up to, I would say, very near or farsighted, to the point where things were kind of visible, but not as defined as what Class C was. And so initially, actually, when I did my eye appointment to get sorted for track, I was actually put in Class B, and it drove me insane because I do have enough usable vision to be Class C, which I'll get to in a minute. But Class B also ran on the guide wires. There was certain elements of, for example, the long jump was done standing in Classes A and B, and that drove me insane because I had enough speed running-wise that I could compete in the running long jump and be successful. And I'll get to how I did that in a minute. But so the blind aspect of this is where this comes in. Class A was considered functionally, you're totally blind. Class B, you have vision, but we were still treated in that class as though we were blind. We did the same adaptations to most events as Class A, and so even though I had some vision, I was treated as a blind person because that was just the way this sport was adapted. Now, Class C was, I would say, people like myself were kind of on the bottom of Class C, or on the border with B and C, and so I actually got bumped up to B when it was discovered that I could stay in my lane and do the running long jump and those sorts of things. All the way to people who basically could drive a car unless they took out their contacts. And there literally were people who were legally blind when they took their contacts out, but when they were, put their contacts in, they could drive. And so I was competing against people far more sighted than myself, who maybe had better coordination in some ways. And so I was never a star track athlete, but I had fun. And I think part of the way the community specifically looks at blindness can be kind of summed up here, is that in Classes A and B, you were considered blind by the way the sport treated you, right? And in Class C, you were almost sighted. And that was like a line between B and C. There was blind and not blind. And when you were, in Class C, you kind of got the free run of the place. You could run your laps around the circle like everybody else. You could do the running long jump. But if you were in A and B and you were, functionally totally blind, the world wasn't safe for you and needed to be adapted accordingly. And I get functionally that that's not what they meant. But now that the community as a whole is something I'm a part of and have been a part of, and by the community, I mean the BVI specific, blind visually impaired community, there is this divide between people who are blind and people who are more sighted. And for me personally, I still use the word blind because I'm legally blind. In the eyes of the government, I cannot drive a car. I am legally blind. There are certain licensing requirements I don't need for my community education, training, exercises, that sort of thing. And it's not a huge deal, but I also find that for sighted people, it's easier for me to explain backwards from blind and say, yep, I'm blind. I have a small bit of usable vision in one eye for travel, that being my left, and a not so small, or not so usable, bit of vision in my right eye that I use. It's easier for me to explain backwards from blind than it is for me to, for instance, use the term visually impaired. So visually impaired, well, your vision is impaired, okay. How much? Can you see? Can you not see? Do you have a dog? Do you read Braille? What does that mean? And so I find it's easier to explain my life by explaining backwards from blind than by using any other term than blind. So that's just my perspective, my thoughts on the word blind. I know it got long-winded there. Thank you if you stuck with me. I very much appreciate you. And after these two videos, I'm going to put both of these up that I just recorded. So you're seeing this as the second in that series. If there are words, if there are topics, if there are things specifically that you want me to cover about visual impairment questions, that sort of thing that you have, there are almost 300 of you here who have stuck around. And I really want to be able to incorporate your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, queries, theories, and everything else as I continue to film on this channel. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Peace.